Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
we all remember hanging chads from Florida in 2000.
And now there's 2020's version of election controversy, mail-in ballots.
Make sure that this doesn't affect the outcome of the election.
Illinois congressman on suspending cuts to the U.S. Postal Service, the stimulus, and the Democratic National Convention.
Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country.
And more highlights from day one of the DNC. Our Spotlight Politics team has that and what to look forward to tonight.
What's it like to be a first-time delegate celebrating this year's virtual convention?
I will be signing a full and complete pardon for Susan B. Anthony.
A pardon for a women's suffrage pioneer as the nation celebrates the 100th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote.
Details on a warning issued for large waves in Lake Michigan.
100 baht every night.
And a famous Chicago food vendor opens his own restaurant. But first, some of today's top stories. If you want to visit Navy Pier, you'll only have a few more weeks to do it. The pier is slated to shut down for the entire fall and winter starting September 8th. A Pier spokesperson says the tourist attraction is simply losing too much money. The economics don't make sense to stay open. Navy Pier has lost $20 million this year, which amounts to a third of its total operating budget. The spokesperson says there is no reopening date yet, but says he is confident that this shutdown will be temporary.
This pier has survived a war. We've been around for a very long time. This is a major, iconic, cultural, civic institution in this city. When people around the world come to Chicago, they visit Navy Pier.
Day two of the Democratic National Convention has some Illinois delegation members talking about women in leadership, but avoiding questions about their own state party's leadership. In a Zoom press event, delegation members largely stayed away from questions about whether or not House Speaker Michael Madigan should stay on as Democratic Party chairman, given his implication in an alleged massive federal bribery scheme. Reporters were allowed to submit questions to party officials today to read to the participants, and only 2 members decided to answer. And here's what they had to say.
I just think we need to keep our eyes on the main prize, and that's Biden, Harris, and all the other Dems that are running and flipping the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm in agreement with both Mayor Lightfoot, with Governor Pritzker, right now with Congresswoman Kelly, that if these allegations, turn out to be true, then he should resign both of his positions immediately. It's really that simple.
And we have a full slate of special coverage of the Democratic National Convention throughout the program, including hearing from some Illinois Congress members and a convention edition of Spotlight Politics. Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who you just heard from, is scheduled to be on our program tomorrow night. Chicago public school children and parents are getting a glimpse at what fall's remote learning is going to look like. CPS unveiled its framework for the fall period, splitting the day into live, real-time instruction from teachers and independent learning activities for students. Lunch and breaks will also be factored into the day, as well as virtual elective courses. CPS says attendance will be taken every day, and students will be assigned regular grades for their coursework. And there's more information on this plan on our website. Chicago's top public health official says the city is nowhere near where it needs to be in halting the spread of COVID-19. The city is averaging more than 300 new cases per day and a testing positivity rate of 5%. Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady says the spread is especially high among 18 to 29-year-olds and in the Hispanic Latino community.
We continue to see people diagnosed with COVID in every zip code in Chicago. We continue to see people who get very sick with COVID. We see people admitted to the hospital, and we're still seeing, on average, 2 to 3 people dying every day just among Chicago residents.
And the city's also modified its travel quarantine orders. Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Utah are off the list. That means travelers to Chicago from those states will not have to quarantine for 14 days. However, Iowa and Kansas are now back on that travel quarantine list. This comes as state health officials report 1,700 new confirmed COVID-19 cases in Illinois for a total of just under 210,000. The state's also reporting 27 additional confirmed deaths for a total death toll of more than 7,700. In 2000, there were hanging chads. In 2020, there's mail-in ballots. For more on this latest election controversy, we go back to you, Brandis.
Thank you, Paris. The United States got a new Postmaster General in May, and he came in with a plan to make changes. But now he says he's putting them on hold. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the latest and what it might mean for Illinois residents and voters. Amanda.
Brandis, the pandemic keeping people inside, which means that folks are really relying heavily on deliveries and getting packages, getting mail, including using the mail to cast their ballots in November's election. That's a trend President Donald Trump is dubious about.
This is a thing that will be a disaster like never before.
Those sort of comments contribute to why the changes that Postmaster General Louis DeJoy wants to make have become such a flashpoint. Democratic members of Illinois' congressional delegation gathered this morning at a group press conference to denounce DeJoy's plans and to accuse Trump of harming the Postal Service as a means of sabotaging the election.
And we checked, folks. The inscription on the post office, neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. It does not say, unless it hurts the president's re-election.
Democrats say that service reductions and cutbacks on Postal Service overtime are behind constituents' complaints about tardy mail, something that they say is causing a problem for businesses, for those who rely on the mail to bring them their medications.
Then there's a whole bunch of people worried about having to pay late payments because their bills have not arrived.
All troublesome, but given the stakes in November, it is the issue of potential delays of ballots sent in by mail that's become the real lightning rod.
This will, folks, be the year of mail-in ballots for elections, more than ever in our history, and more than in an election which is arguably the most important of our lifetime.
Director of the Election Cyber Security Initiative, which is out of the University of Southern California, Adam Clayton Powell III, says officials got in touch with his organization a year ago about vote-by-mail concerns.
And that included and includes our ballots being delivered to eligible voters, our ballots being delivered to ineligible voters. Do voters have enough time to return the ballots? And are the ballots delivered in a way to the proper place?
Powell says that the turnover at the USPS and how politicized this has all become makes those existing challenges even more so, as has the surge in expected mail-in ballots due to the pandemic. Illinois lawmakers, during their brief spring session, passed a law that is intended to encourage as many voters as possible to vote by mail. That new law is highlighted in a lawsuit that was filed today by 14 state attorneys general, including Illinois. The complaint contends that the USPS has removed or plans to remove critical mail sorting equipment from at least 7 facilities in Illinois, and that maintaining and enhancing USPS capacity is an urgent priority for Illinois in light of the expansion of vote-by-mail options Illinois has adopted in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This even as Postmaster General DeJoy now says he will postpone making those reforms he says will make the Postal Service more sustainable. To avoid even the appearance of an impact on election mail, I am suspending these initiatives until after the election is concluded, he said in a statement issued today. That doesn't mean that Democrats are satisfied. Congress will convene starting Saturday with plans to debate a bill they say will further protect the Postal Service. Nor does it mean that the election cybersecurity initiatives, Powell says, all concerns about voting by mail are allayed.
Well, everybody's trying to make it more convenient, but in our core competency in cybersecurity, every time you make something more convenient, you probably introduce new risks.
In this case, when lawmakers, including in Illinois, extended as long as possible the deadlines for voting by mail.
something has to give on the other end. You can't have just 3 or 4 business days to request a ballot, get the ballot out, return the ballot. That's not realistic. So something has to give somewhere.
In Illinois, there is some of that give. While you do need to have your ballot postmarked on or before Election Day, authorities, so county clerks, elections authorities, have actually 2 weeks until after the election to receive that mail, and then the ballots will still be counted. Regardless, while Powell isn't in the business of forecasting who is going to win November's election, he does have a prediction.
Is litigation everywhere. That everywhere where it's going to be close. We all remember hanging chads from Florida in 2000. Now it's going to be comparing signatures and postmarks and return addresses for thousands, maybe millions of mailed-in ballots.
So with all of that, and regardless of what Congress does or does not do, elections authorities here in Illinois stress that you want to make sure to avoid any potential problems by getting in both your ballots and also an application for a vote by mail ballot, if that's the route you're going to go, as soon as possible. Brandes, back to you.
An election like no other. Amanda, thank you. We'll see you back here a little bit later in the program to talk about the highs and lows of day 1 of the DNC in a special convention edition of Spotlight Politics. But first, to Paris Schutz, who kicks off our special coverage of the Democratic Convention with 2 congressmen from Chicago in a conversation recorded just a short while ago. Paris.
Brandes, the Democrats have come out swinging. Former First Lady Michelle Obama said President Donald Trump was in over his head. Some Republicans made their pitch to vote for Joe Biden. And Bernie Sanders called Trump an authoritarian. And that's all just night 1 of the first ever virtual Democratic National Convention. All this comes amid news that the U.S. Postmaster General will suspend cuts to the Postal Service after concerns the cuts were attempts to alter mail-in voting in the election. And joining us now as part of our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention are Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, a Democrat who represents the 4th Congressional District, which includes parts of the northwest and southwest sides of Chicago, among other areas, and Congressman Danny Davis, a Democrat of the 7th Congressional District, which includes parts of the west side of Chicago and many near western suburbs. Gentlemen, thank you for being back here on Chicago Tonight.
Thank you very much.
Great to be with you.
All right, so I want to start with the news of the day. The Postmaster General announcing that the Postal Service will suspend any further service cuts, removal of mailboxes, removal of sorting machines until after the election to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Congressman Davis, does this assuage your concerns?
Well, I think there was action all over the nation by Democrats who were holding press conferences, having demonstrations, talking about how ridiculous it was that those decisions were being contemplated. And so I think the back off or the back down for the moment, but we're not going to sleep about it. We're going to stay awake or stay woke, and we're going to make sure that we hold him to the decisions that he made today.
And Congressman Garcia, some Illinois Democrats have joined other Democrats around the country in calling for a criminal investigation to what's happened at the Postal Service. What kind of wrongdoing do you believe might have happened?
Well, I think that many of us have suspected that the initiatives by DeJoy to cut back on overtime, to reduce hours, to prohibit the normal delivery of mail was an attempt on behalf of the president to deliberately and maliciously tamper with the election outcomes in November. I think the response from the public, including the polling that's been done on this issue, told them that they better not go forward with it because it would boomerang. It would affect them in a negative way. And, you know, when people came to understand that this was affecting people's medication, their unemployment checks, their disability benefits, their immigration paperwork, they started to speak out. And I think the clamor that they caused has forced the administration to reconsider I'm glad we'll be there on Saturday in the House of Representatives to take action to provide the funding necessary to take measures to make sure that this doesn't affect the outcome of the election.
And this is a $25 billion appropriation to the Postal Service that you're going to vote on. Congressman Davis, does that have bipartisan support? I have seen some Republican Congress people come forward in support.
It does have some bipartisan support. You know, we passed it more than 2 months ago. We've been waiting on the Republicans to come around. And I think the hue and cry of the public is such that they will come around, and we're going to have the resources needed by the Postal Service to function in an efficient way and make sure that when people vote, they don't have to worry about whether or not their vote is going to be delayed or won't get counted or won't be where it's supposed to be in time.
All right, I want to move on to some politics. As we mentioned, it was day one of the convention last night, a different convention, virtual. Congressman Garcia, all this is happening as the leader of your party, the Democratic Party in Illinois, Mike Madigan, is under scrutiny for his alleged tie to this ComEd bribery scheme. Do you believe that he should still serve as leader of the Democratic Party?
Look, I'm a strong believer in due process. As a matter of fact, I am leading a bill in Congress to restore due process in the immigration system in this country and to protect people's rights to due process. Because there hasn't been a charge brought against him, I think that we should not prejudge him. There's reason to be concerned, and some legislators have called for his resignation from those posts, but I believe in due process, and I'm not ready to say that he ought to resign.
Although, I mean, the criminal information against ComEd makes it clear that Madigan is allegedly public official A. Congressman Davis, are you comfortable with Madigan leading your party in Illinois?
Well, I think we have to practice what we preach. I've always been taught that individuals are innocent until proven guilty. And oftentimes when there are speculations and accusations, you got to wait and see what really happens. And so I believe in this concept. I believe that until one is determined to be guilty, it's an accusation. And the accusation has not been proven. And so we'll have to wait and see.
Let's move to some of the speeches from last night. Here's former First Lady Michelle Obama, of course, a Chicago native, making her case against Donald Trump and for Joe Biden.
This is not the time to withhold our votes in protest or play games with candidates who have no chance of winning. We've got to vote early, in person if we can. We've got to request our mail-in ballots right now, tonight.
Congressman Garcia, typically there is a boost in polling after conventions because of all the excitement and crowds and in person. Do you anticipate that will happen here with this all virtual convention?
I think that when people have had an opportunity to hear the many messages, including the very powerful message from the former First Lady last night, I thought she had the most memorable lines and speeches and appeal, especially to young people, to come out, that there will be a bounce. I think what is also totally different from previous conventions is the fact that we are living in a tumultuous period in history with the pandemic coupled with the movement for racial justice across the nation. I think that will motivate especially young voters to come out and participate. And many who withheld their vote or voted in protest in 2016 have reconsidered. And I think that the fact that there are also so many lifelong Republicans who are questioning Donald Trump's ability to lead the country during this period is all going to bode very well for Democrats.
Let's take a look at one of those lifelong Republicans, former Ohio Governor John Kasich, making the case for Biden last night.
Joe Biden is a man for our times, times that call for all of us to take off our partisan hats and put our nation first for ourselves and, of course, for our children.
Congressman Davis, 4 years ago, the party wasn't quite united. You had the Bernie Sanders wing, you had the Hillary Clinton wing not really getting along. How does this compare to that?
Let me tell you, I was tremendously impressed with Senator Sanders' speech, his continuous call for unity. and unification and acknowledging that, yeah, there might be some instances where there's disagreement, but those disagreements can be worked through. And no matter what those disagreements might be, nothing is more important than making sure that President Trump can no longer be called president. And so the unification was just good to see.
We're going to have to leave it there. My thanks to Congressman Chuy Garcia and Congressman Danny Davis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll have more special coverage of the Democratic National Convention just ahead, including a convention edition of Spotlight Politics. But first, Brandis, we go back to you.
Thanks, Paris. People across the country are witnessing a historic Democratic National Convention. The catch is, it's behind their TV and computer screens. Conventions of the past have been known for their fanfare, typically filled with parties and large rallies. So this year has been an unconventional convention for everyone, especially first-time delegates. Joining us now as part of our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention are two first-time delegates, Melissa Conyers-Irvin, the Chicago City Treasurer and a Biden delegate, and Crystal Garcia Centeno, a member of the Progressive Turnout Project and a Sanders delegate. Thanks to you both for joining us. So, Melissa Conyers-Irvin, let's start with you, please. What is your reaction to the convention being held virtually?
Obviously, it's a shock. When I became a delegate or was pursuing the office of becoming a delegate, I did not expect that it would be a pandemic, right? But you know what? I am embracing the experience. And every time I think about what we're in right now, this pandemic is even more of a certainty and more of a reason why it is so important that I am a delegate right now. So, I mean, you talk about the historic, and I know we'll get into that, all the historic significance of this election, but just the also historical significance of us being in the middle of a pandemic. And I know that everyone is experiencing what is going on. It is certainly the right time for us to make certain that we get the right person in the White House. So I think that this is a historic time in so many ways.
Right, and we will get to a couple of those things that you mentioned. But Crystal Garcia Centeno, wanted to get your opinion. What was your reaction to the convention being held virtually?
I think it's bittersweet. Obviously, I would have loved to have experienced the in-person convention, but I think the party made the right call here and did the right thing by making it a virtual convention instead. But yeah, like Melissa said, I'm just trying to embrace the experience as much as I can.
What are you, Crystal? What are you doing to still make to make it special and eventful for you?
Yeah, so I think part of an advantage of it being virtual is that now I get to be with my family and watch the convention. So one thing my mom did most of the time when I grew up was make sure that I was with her watching the inauguration of President Obama, or making sure that I was there to watch and witness historic events throughout my life. And so I'm the oldest sister. I have two younger siblings. So for me, it's important that I have them next to me watching the DNC this year.
And Melissa Conyers-Irvin, how has your role as a delegate changed this year in a virtual convention from what it would have normally been in what used to be typical?
Well, typically we would be in Milwaukee right now, and I was actually very much looking forward to going so very close to home. I thought, wow, what a great time to be a delegate. Obviously, plans have changed, and as Crystal said, for the right reason. I do want to reiterate that the convention did the right thing in making sure that this were virtual. But I'll tell you, I can't really tell the difference of the excitement. The momentum is with the Democratic Party, and this is certainly our race to win. And for me, I think about, obviously, I was looking forward to being on the convention floor, but you think about the time where I have the opportunity as a delegate to be able to nominate the first Black woman as the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, and to do that in the same room with my young daughter, a young Black girl. I think about that, and I'll tell you, for me, that moment is priceless. So while I certainly was looking forward to being on the convention floor and the experience of being a delegate. You know, they keep our schedule so full right now. It's like all day we're in virtual meetings doing things, and you know, all the speeches that they have lined up. I mean, they have everyone lined up to speak on this week. So I feel the momentum, and I'm even more excited to share this experience, this historic experience with my young daughter.
So you're still convening, if not, you know, in Milwaukee. Crystal Garcia Centeno, is there a policy or an issue that you're particularly eager to hear about this week?
So I think day one really focused on like unity and coming together, but I think it did lack like a lot of direct policy conversations. So I definitely would love to hear more on, you know, healthcare, education. They did mention a lot about like the racial injustices that we are seeing today, but I would like to hear more about, you know, what's the party's stance on like directly what we're going to be doing about that moving forward.
Last night at the DNC, Michelle Obama spoke about the importance of voting during her speech. Here's what she said.
We have to vote for Joe Biden in numbers that cannot be ignored. Because right now, folks who know they cannot win fair and square at the ballot box are doing everything they can to stop us from voting. They're closing down polling places in minority neighborhoods. They're purging voter rolls. They're sending people out to intimidate voters, and they're lying about the security of our ballots.
We've got a minute left. I'm going to ask both of you. Melissa Conyers-Irvin, first, what is your message to voters, having heard what Michelle Obama just said?
Vote. My message to voters is they cannot suppress our vote. My message to voters is this is a historic time that you want to be a part of, a historic time where we can change the leadership in the White House. And so what I encourage people, whether that's going to be voting by mail, voting in person, early voting, whatever the situation may be. And by the way, I intend on choosing the method that is best for my family and I. Choose the method that is best for you and do that. I would encourage everyone, please vote. What we are experiencing right now is detrimental to our country, and not just our country, but more so working families. And I just want to say that because I know you asked Crystal that question about the important issues.
And we are actually out of time. But Crystal, like, really quick, 10 seconds, what is your message?
Pretty much the same thing. Go out and vote. Choose the best method for you and your family. And yeah, vote early and vote by mail if possible. And yeah, thank you guys for having me. And
vote early and vote often. All right. My thanks to Melissa Conyers-Irvin and Crystal Garcia Centeno. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
100 years ago today, the 19th Amendment was ratified, giving women the right to vote. It came after a young Tennessee state representative, Harry T. Byrne, voted to break a tie in his state's legislature. That made Tennessee the 36th state to ratify the amendment. Byrne had wavered on his vote, but it was a letter from his mother that helped him make up his mind. Byrne may have cast the pivotal vote, but it was women who had pushed the issue to that point, as this short clip from the PBS American Experience documentary, The Vote, makes clear.
Textbooks said women were given the vote. We weren't given anything. We took it.
A lot can happen in 100 years. Would those early suffragists think it's enough? Joining us now to talk about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage is Jane Daly, Associate Professor of History at the University of Chicago. So 100 years ago today, as we just said, the 19th Amendment was ratified, granting women, but we should say mostly white women, the right to vote. What did it take for the country to get to that point, Jane Daly?
It took a lot to get to that vote. It took Western expansion because the Western states were the first ones to pass women's suffrage laws. And it took a lot of politics of race, too, because people who were against women's suffrage recognized that African-American women might indeed get to vote if they passed the suffrage amendment.
And many of the first suffragists, they were also active in the movement to abolish slavery. Explain, if you would, the connection between the abolitionist cause and how these women were radicalized at the time.
Right. Well, there's a connection in personnel in the form of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Frederick Douglass. So you have people who bridge the the divide between the two social movements. But there was also an ideological connection, because they started to speak in the language of equality when they thought about slave abolition, and women decided they ought to be included in humanity and be equal as well.
And what role did Black women play in the suffragette movement, the suffrage movement?
Black women played actually really important roles, particularly in the South, also in the North, but most of them lived still south of the Mason-Dixon line, and they formed organizations, African-American women's suffrage organizations, and they also worked together with progressive white women to get the 19th Amendment passed.
But this movement didn't fully work for Black women. What did it do for Black women, and how were they excluded, or how were they left out in the end?
Well, they weren't completely left out. In the end, Black women did vote in Southern states. More Black women were able to vote in Southern states than Black men were able to vote in those years, mostly because white men who used violence to keep Black men from voting were actually inhibited from doing that against Black women and the white women who were at the polls with them.
At the time, World War I had recently ended. How did that influence the movement?
World War I think, was important because so many women had come into the public sphere during that war. They were working as nurses, they went overseas, they worked with the YWCA. They became very visible as war workers at the same time that their own movement really heated up, and they were taking to the streets. They were, camping out in front of the White House in these years.
President Trump is pardoning Susan B. Anthony. Explain her role in the women's suffrage movement.
Susan B. Anthony was a great champion of women's suffrage. She and Elizabeth Cady Stanton really worked together a lot of the time. They went on the lecture circuit together. They protested together. She tried to vote in, I think it was 1872, and was arrested. And that's how she has something to be pardoned.
What were the arguments at the time against suffrage?
Oh, there were lots of arguments, and many of them were made by women. One major argument was that the idea that the head of the household, the man, was casting a representative vote for everyone, so that fathers represented the interests of their wives and daughters and sons at the polling station. And there were a lot of women who believed that to be true and wanted to keep it that way. Other arguments, especially for African-American women, were that racial politics would be upset if Black women could go to the polls.
There was also a relationship between temperance and suffrage. What was that?
There was. Again, one of personnel with Frances Willard from Evanston as the leader of the temperance forces. There was also, though, temperance itself sparked a backlash against women's suffrage because women were more likely to support temperance than men were, and men feared, and quite rightly, that if they gave women the vote, they would vote for temperance. So that was behind some of the politics against women's suffrage.
So, after the passage of women's suffrage, was that the end of the movement, or did women stick together to shift their focus onto something else?
Well, it wasn't, I'm not sure I would say it was the end of the movement. I would say it fractured, meaning that some women went on to become women's rights activists in the mode of birth control, for example, following Margaret Sanger and others, whereas other women who had been deep advocates for suffrage decided that they had it and they could, that was it. They'd achieved their goal and they weren't gonna protest anymore.
So 100 years later, there are some things that, women say they are still fighting for: equal pay, representation in government. How do you think the women who fought for suffrage then would view the status of women in modern day society?
Oh, I think they would be amazed, frankly. And I think they would really, really have been amazed by Hillary Clinton. Here's a woman who won the popular vote in a presidential election. I'm not sure they could have imagined that even 100 years out.
100 years later. Jane Daly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And now, Paris, we go back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. Still to come on Chicago tonight, the National Weather Service issues a warning for Lake Michigan's massive waves. We have details.
Only 3-4 minutes in the bar and go to vámonos.
Chicago's own Tamale Guy opens a brick-and-mortar restaurant. And our Spotlight Politics team previews Jill Biden's turn in the spotlight at the DNC as part of special convention coverage. But first, some of today's top stories. City officials are pledging to take action on outdated water pipes that have been shown to contaminate tap water with lead. Water Management Commissioner Randy Connor tells City Council members that the agency is finalizing a plan that would replace the lead service lines connecting 400,000 Chicago homes with water mains. The plan could cost between $8 and $10 billion over several years. And city officials did not say how the city specifically would pay for this massive project, but indicated they would need help from state and federal sources. And there's more on this story on our website. One of singer R. Kelly's criminal trials is being postponed due to COVID. A U.S. District Court judge today postponed Kelly's October trial, in which he faces charges of child pornography and obstruction of justice. That's just one of 4 federal trials Kelly faces. Kelly is currently held without bail at the Metropolitan Correctional Center downtown and faces federal cases in New York and Minnesota, plus multiple state cases right here in Cook County. Illinois residents struggling to pay their bills have a little more time to apply for some rental assistance. Governor J.B. Pritzker announces the Housing Development Authority is extending the deadline to apply by 10 days, so that gives folks until noon next Friday, August 28th. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program provides up to $5,000 for tenants who've had their income drop due to COVID-19. And the Illinois Department of Public Health reports 1,700 new confirmed COVID-19 cases in Illinois for a total of just under 210,000. The state is also reporting 27 additional confirmed deaths for a total death toll of more than 7,700. The National Weather Service has a public service announcement for Chicagoans. Stay out of the water. The Lake Michigan may look like a welcoming infinity pool at times. Don't be fooled. Massive waves were spotted in the Chicago area, northwest Indiana, and southwest Michigan earlier today. Joining us with more details right now is WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley. Hey, Patty, how's it going?
Hey, Paris.
All right,
good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So what's the NWS seeing here that it's putting out this warning?
Well, you know, they don't need to be massive waves to cause a lot of trouble for swimmers. So lake waves, when they get to the 3 to 6 foot range, that's kind of when there are the most incidents with swimmers getting into trouble and drownings, because people don't quite take that height of wave very seriously, and they can be exhausting for swimmers and also create really strong currents. So the advice when the waves hit that level is just stay out of the water and steer clear of the shoreline too.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just for beachgoers here, because you've got high lake levels and you walk along the concrete shoreline of the bike path, and the water's already sort of covering it.
Well, and the fact of the matter is that with the beaches closed, a lot of people are sort of, you know, getting around that by dipping in places that aren't sandy. I mean, I've seen people in, you know, right off those jetties or going in off the revetments, and those are actually sometimes even more dangerous. The piers can actually be where the strongest currents are, and they will just take you out into much deeper water than you're able to cope with. So it's also steer clear of the piers as well as just stay out of the water.
All right, Patty, thank you very much for this warning. I will certainly steer clear of all of that.
Yes.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. For 20 years, Claudio Velez, a.k.a. the Tamale Guy, went bar to bar with a cooler full of tamales, selling them to hungry and sometimes inebriated patrons. Velez switched to home deliveries during the COVID-19 shutdown, but a cease and desist letter for operating without a food license temporarily put him out of business. So after some help from the community, the Tamale Guy now has his own restaurant. This is the latest in our Chicago Portrait series. It's primarily in Spanish, but English subtitles are provided.
Everybody. Only 3-4 minutes in the bar, I go to vámonos. 100 bar. Every night.
5516.
Estoy en mi restaurante que acabamos de abrir hoy. Y estuvo muy bueno el primer día de trabajo, pero muy bueno. Me siento muy emocionado. Y le doy gracias a Dios y a todas las personas que me ayudaron para hacer posible el sueño americano. Es más bueno para mí porque pues, ya estoy tranquilo, estoy trabajando con todos los permisos de la ciudad, nadie me va a molestar y estamos bien. Vamos a tener tamales de pollo en salsa verde, tamales de queso con rajas en salsa verde, tamales de puerco en salsa roja y vamos a tener los tradicionales son. Chicago para mí es la segunda ciudad más preciosa después de México. Acapulco, yo soy de Acapulco, pero Chicago es Acapulco 2. Para mí Chicago es lo mejor que pude haber conocido.
Do you have any pre-COVID-19 memories of the Tamale guy? I actually might have a few. Visit our website or social media to share them with us. And up next, more of our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention with our Spotlight Politics team. But first, we take a look at the weather.
The first day of this historic virtual Democratic National Convention is in the books, with Michelle Obama leading the charge on night one. Our Spotlight Politics team is here to dive into last night's highlights and look at what we can expect on night two. And they are Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. So let's start with former First Lady Michelle Obama. She was the keynote speaker, and among other things, she used Donald Trump's own words against him. Let's take a look.
Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He has had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Heather, remind us when the president said that.
He said that a few weeks ago in an interview with Axios when asked about the death toll, which at that point was approaching 150,000 Americans. Right now, it's past 170,000 Americans who've died from the coronavirus. And I was watching that, and I'm sure I made a gasp because I can't remember another time when Michelle Obama has been as pointed and as direct in her criticism of the president. And for her to use his name like that was really sort of a very important moment, I think, on the first night of the convention.
Paris, well, I've got you. What was your reaction to Michelle Obama saying that?
Well, it was almost like a fireside chat, the tone that she used to speak, without a crowd. It's a very measured tone, but she also said, when they go low, we go high, and going high is the only thing we can do. But it certainly was in some ways a devastating takedown of the president and an argument to not reelect him and to reelect Joe Biden. So Michelle Obama says she doesn't like politics, she hates politics, and it almost makes her very good and credible at this part of it because you think that she's not doing this for politics, she's doing this because she really believes it.
Now, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Go ahead, Amanda. I just, even my non-political friends, but those who are engaged, she also hit a home run with her vote necklace. People on both sides of the aisle really liked that one.
Yeah, everybody's talking about that. And she always has a way of selling accessories and clothes as well, whether or not she intends to. So Senator Bernie Sanders made his pitch to bring in all voters. Let's listen.
To everyone who supported other candidates in the primary, and to those who may have voted for Donald Trump in the last election. The future of our democracy is at stake. The future of our economy is at stake. The future of our planet is at stake. We must come together, defeat Donald Trump, and elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our next president and vice president.
Amanda, how strong was his message?
It was a strong message. He got in a couple of zingers, one that was notable, Nero-fiddled Trump golfs, talking about how the president has handled the pandemic. So there was the stinging anti-Trump rhetoric, but also what Sanders really was, I'm sure, charged with by Biden's team, and that is convincing the progressive part of the Democratic Party, the liberals who had backed Sanders, to get on board, saying, because certainly there are those who are disappointed that Biden is the nominee, disappointed as well that Kamala Harris is the chosen VP. They wanted somebody that was going to take a more progressive stance. And Sanders, he went through and he did in DNC first evening that was light on a lot of details. He gave a few, going through and sharing some of the progressive causes that he believes that Biden will back. That was interesting, though, because Sanders saying this, hey, he's got you progressives, came also, of course, as Biden is really going out of his way to try to reach moderates and never Trump Republicans.
No, there was also big appeal for disaffected Republican voters. Former Republican governor and former candidate for president himself, John Kasich, made the pitch. Let's watch.
I'm sure there are Republicans and independents who couldn't imagine crossing over to support a Democrat. They fear Joe may turn sharp left and leave them behind. I don't believe that, because I know the measure of the man. It's reasonable, faithful, respectful. And you know, no one pushes Joe around.
You know, Paris, you couldn't see it in that clip, but John Kasich was literally standing at a crossroads, at a fork in the road. Was it ironic that, you know, on the same night, you've got both Sanders and Kasich appealing to their respective bases?
Right, and Kasich really trying to drive home that crossroads point. Well, I think the point that Kasich just made there is not the point that the Bernie Sanders voters wanted to hear. I mean, you had Bernie Sanders saying the opposite. Now you have Kasich saying, no, I don't think he's going to go along that route. I'm doing this because I think he's going to be a moderate person that works across the aisle. But, you know, Kasich 4 years ago ran for president, and at the RNC, he did not go into the convention. He took a similar stance. I don't think he voted for Hillary Clinton, but I think that he refused to be a part of the convention because he didn't like where the party was headed then. He did not support Donald Trump. And by the way, back 4 years ago at that convention, I would say the lion's share of the establishment Republicans either didn't go or they did not support Donald Trump. Other candidates like Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham had very harsh things to say about the party and about Trump. And you see some of these long-term Republicans, they took different paths. Some of them got on board. Others, with John Kasich, stayed consistent with the message of saying that this is not the way he wants the party to go.
Now, Amanda, the DNC also featured some other Republicans who've come out in favor of Biden. How important is it to woo all of these disaffected voters, and did they pull it off?
Well, it's important, particularly in some of these battleground states. So not really Illinois, unless something goes very, very wild. Biden is going to win in this very blue state, but in some of our neighboring states, you look at Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, yes, it is important to transcend, particularly if you look at how it was that Trump became the president, losing the popular vote, but winning again in these battleground states, allowing him to win in the Electoral College. So I do think that you had this is a scripted event, as we have spoken about. It is very polished. So yes, all of those speeches were made to make that point. They did drive it home. The question might be, however, if you're one of these moderates that's undecided, are you really spending your night watching the DNC on TV?
Who knows? So that's a fair question.
And the ratings, by the way, are down. I mean, by a little bit, by about a quarter, according to, I guess, recent reports that, you know, from 4 years ago. So but we'll see if they pick up.
Yeah. So Mayor Lori Lightfoot, she made a brief appearance during an edited conversation about racial justice. Joe Biden asked her how she's tackling and prioritizing issues around systemic racism here in Chicago. Let's hear what she had to say.
It really is about economic empowerment, because if people are lifted out of poverty and they are given an opportunity to feel a stake in their own future, that goes a long way.
So Heather, you know, tell us a little bit about, like, you know, her screen time and the message there.
Well, it was very, very brief and it was very, very scripted, but it is on message for her. Just before the coronavirus pandemic shut everything down, she unveiled a very ambitious anti-poverty agenda, which she said was designed to address these systemic problems that have bedeviled Black Chicagoans and Latino Chicagoans. So she was speaking from her wheelhouse there. And I think that, you know, it's a hard argument to be making right now when crime is up and when people are worried about their livelihoods, that really the answer to crime is much more complicated than more police or cracking down or sending people to jail. But she has been saying that for a long time. And now, you know, it's come to a point where we will have to see whether that, you know, is enough to sort of bring her through this public safety crisis we're dealing with in Chicago.
The DNC also focused on the lives lost during this unprecedented time, including hearing from George Floyd's brother and a woman who lost her dad to COVID-19. Here's a look at that.
After the stay-at-home order was lifted in Arizona, my dad went to a karaoke bar with his friends. A few weeks later, he was put on a ventilator, and after 5 agonizing days, he died alone. My dad was a healthy 65-year-old. His only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump, and for that, he paid with his life.
Please join me in a moment of silence to honor George and the many other souls we lost to hate and injustice. And when this moment ends, let's make sure we never stop saying their names.
Paris, were these powerful, effective moments?
Yeah, I think they were the most effective moments, well, among the most effective moments of the night. Remember, 4 years ago at the DNC, there was a military father who had lost his son, Mr. Khan, that was sort of the standout moment of that convention. But, you know, take a look at Ms. Urquiza from Arizona. You know, it's a fact that the president downplayed the coronavirus at the very beginning. The president has also sought to sort of sow distrust in journalism that he doesn't like, in media that he doesn't like. And as a result, a lot of people who are very supportive of the president listen to the president. And that's what Ms. Urquiza is alleging her dad did. I mean, he trusted the president, and according to Ms. Urquiza, it cost him his life. It's an incredibly powerful statement. And again, I mean, last night we saw kind of for the first time eulogizing the victims of COVID-19. We haven't seen the president really do that. We haven't seen it much in the national media. And then one more, a Chicago connection here. The Chicago musician, now I'm blanking on his name, he's one of my John Prine, who died of COVID-19. His music, his last song that he recorded was the backdrop of that in memoriam moment. Again, another powerful moment with a Chicago connection.
Now, President Donald Trump, he's on the road again today in both Iowa and Arizona, but he also reacted to day one of the DNC. In a tweet this morning at 6 a.m., quote, "Somebody please explain to Michelle Obama that Donald J. Trump would not be here in the beautiful White House if it weren't for the job done by your husband, Barack Obama. Biden was merely an afterthought." So then today at the 19th Amendment commemoration honoring the women's right to vote, Trump said that Michelle Obama was in over her head. Let's listen.
She was over her head, and frankly, she should have made the speech live, which she didn't do. She taped it, and it was not only taped, it was taped a long time ago because she had the wrong deaths. She didn't even mention the vice presidential candidate in the speech, and you know, she gets these fawning reviews. If you gave a real review, it wouldn't be so fawning. I thought it was a very divisive speech.
So Heather, it seems like she's using, the president is actually using Michelle Obama's words over her head. What's your reaction? Did she get under his skin?
I think she certainly did. And it's quite an interesting argument to say that, well, you know, tens of thousands of more Americans have died than she said. She said more than 150,000. As I said before, we're almost past 170,000. That's a real argument to be making. But I think, again, it shows you that we have seen time and again that the president does not appreciate any sort of criticism from a woman, much less a Black woman. And I think that has to be part of the reason why Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris, simply because the president can be extremely thin-skinned about criticism from women and from particularly women of color.
And quickly looking ahead to tonight, we've got former Second Lady Jill Biden. She will be the keynote speaker. Also featured tonight are former President and 11-time DNC Speaker, former President Bill Clinton. Also former President Jimmy Carter, who did not speak at the 2016 convention, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and Democratic Socialist Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who only gets 1 minute to speak. Amanda, we've got about 20 seconds. More on what Jill Biden brings tonight.
Jill Biden brings passion for her husband and humanity. Let's look back when she pushed women protesters off a stage to fight for him. She's going to bring that fight tonight, coming to it to all of us from her former classroom. So trying to present again more that personal side.
All right. Thanks to our Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. And make sure you join us tomorrow for another special edition of Spotlight Politics, where we break down the top moments from tonight's speakers and look ahead to night 3. And stay tuned next for PBS NewsHour's coverage of day 2 of the Democratic National Convention, which is in just a few minutes right here on WTTW. But first, that is our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Kamala Harris accepts the nomination for Vice President. We preview day 3 of the Democratic National Convention.
And how this year's Bronzeville Art District Trolley Tour is going virtual. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we will see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.